The firelight from his small cabin flickered through the window as Willem Harrow heard the groan outside, low and pained, carried on the bitter autumn wind that swept down from the northern mountains. He set down the wooden bowl he had been carving and reached for the hunting knife on the table, moving toward the door with the practiced quiet of a man who had learned caution during his years as a border scout. When he opened it, expecting a wounded animal or perhaps bandits testing his defenses, he found instead a figure collapsed against the split rail fence that marked the boundary of his modest homestead. She was an orc, and that fact alone should have sent him reaching for the crossbow mounted above his door. The war had ended only 3 years past, and the scars it left on both sides still bled fresh in memory. But Willem had seen enough death during those brutal campaigns to recognize when someone posed no threat. And this woman was barely conscious, her green skin pale with cold and blood loss, one arm wrapped around her middle where dark stains spread across the rough fabric of her tunic. He approached slowly, keeping his knife visible but lowered. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened, golden and fever-bright, focusing on him with difficulty. She tried to speak but managed only a rattling breath. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps no more than 20 summers, with the small tusks and pointed ears characteristic of her kind. A nasty gash ran along her temple, and from the way she held herself, Willem suspected broken ribs beneath that blood-soaked cloth. "I am going to help you inside," he said, not certain she understood but feeling the need to explain himself anyway. "Try not to fight me. I mean you no harm." She made no protest as he slid an arm beneath her shoulders and another under her knees, lifting her with a grunt of effort. Orc women were solidly built, all muscle and bone, and though she was smaller than the warriors he had faced in battle, she was still no light burden. He carried her through the door and past his simple furnishings, the single room that served as kitchen, workshop, and living space, to the narrow bed against the far wall where he slept when he was not keeping watch on cold nights beneath the stars. Willem laid her down as gently as he could manage and lit the oil lamp that hung from a hook nearby, flooding the space with warm light. The blood had soaked through her tunic entirely now, and he could see the ragged edges of what looked like claw marks across her abdomen. Bear, most likely, or one of the great cats that prowled the mountain passes. He had medical supplies, basic things learned from the army surgeons, and he gathered them quickly while water heated over the fire. "This is going to hurt," he told her, though her eyes had closed again. "But the wounds need cleaning or they will fester." He cut away the ruined fabric of her tunic, trying to maintain whatever dignity he could for her, exposing only what was necessary to treat the injuries. The claw marks were deep, but clean, which was fortunate. He washed them with boiled water and the harsh alcohol he kept for just such purposes, and though she gasped and her eyes flew open, she did not cry out, her golden gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made him pause. "Almost done," Willem said quietly, and he meant it. He packed the wounds with clean cloth soaked in a poultice his mother had taught him to make, then bound them tightly with strips of linen. The head wound was less serious than it appeared, already clotting, and he cleaned it carefully before moving to check her ribs. 3 were cracked, he determined through gentle probing, but none had punctured through the skin. By the time he finished wrapping her torso to stabilize the breaks, dawn was beginning to gray the eastern sky beyond his window. The orc woman had slipped into what he hoped was genuine sleep rather than unconsciousness, her breathing steadier though still shallow. He pulled his only blanket over her and added another log to the fire to keep the room warm. Willem stood there for a long moment, studying her face in the growing light. Without the grimace of pain twisting her features, she looked almost peaceful, and he found himself wondering what circumstances had brought her to his door. Orcs rarely traveled alone through human territories, not since the treaty had established the border lands as neutral ground but left old hatreds simmering on both sides. She wore no clan markings that he could see, no weapons or armor, nothing but the tattered remains of traveling clothes. He made himself a thin breakfast of porridge and dried meat, then gathered what he would need for the day. His nearest neighbor, old Garrett Morrison, lived 3 miles down the valley and would be expecting Willem to help with the wheat harvest. That work could not wait, not with winter coming on fast and the grain needing to be in before the first frost. But he could not leave an injured person alone without water or means to tend the fire. Willem filled a pitcher and placed it on the small table beside the bed along with a cup. He built up the fire until it would burn for hours and left bread and cheese within easy reach. Then, because he had no other choice and the bed was the warmest, driest place in his small home, he took his bedroll and lantern and headed outside. The day passed in hard labor under autumn sun that provided warmth, but no comfort to muscles strained by wielding scythe and hauling grain bundles. Garrett was a taciturn man who asked no questions about why Willem seemed distracted, and for that he was grateful. He had no idea how to explain that he was harboring an orc in his cabin, an act that would see him shunned at best and possibly brought before the territorial magistrate at worst. The laws were unclear on such matters, but sentiment was not. People here had lost sons, brothers, fathers to the war. They would not understand mercy shown to one of the enemy. When the sun finally set, and Garrett dismissed him with a grunt of thanks and a small sack of flour as payment, Willem hurried back up the valley path to his homestead. Smoke still rose from his chimney, which meant the fire had not died, and he felt relief wash through him as he pushed open the door. The orc woman was awake, sitting up carefully against the wall with the blanket pulled around her shoulders. Her golden eyes tracked him as he entered, wary but no longer glazed with fever. She had drunk some of the water and eaten a little bread he saw. "How do you feel?" Willem asked, setting down his pack and the flour. "Like I fought a mountain cat and lost." Her voice was deeper than a human woman's, with a roughness to it that might have been natural or might have been from screaming. "Why did you help me?" "You needed help." He moved to the fire to add wood and set a pot of stew he had prepared that morning to warm. "Do you remember what happened?" "Enough." She shifted, wincing. "I was hunting in the high passes, went after what I thought was a deer. It was a cat's kill. The beast took exception to my presence. You are lucky to be alive. Those wounds could have killed you. I know." She paused, studying him with an expression he could not quite read. "You are human. We are enemies. The war is over. The fighting stopped. That does not make us friends." Willem could not argue with that. He ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought one to her, setting it on the table beside the bed. "My name is Willem Harrow. This is my land, such as it is. You are welcome to stay until you are healed enough to travel." She looked at the bowl, then at him. "I am Thora Brennick. I have nothing to offer in payment. I am not asking for payment." "Why not?" There was genuine confusion in her voice. "I would be within my rights to kill you if I found you wounded in orc lands. That is the way of things. Maybe I am tired of the way of things." Willem took his own bowl and sat in the chair by the fire, suddenly exhausted. "Eat. You need to regain your strength." She did, slowly, and he noticed she ate with her left hand, though she was clearly right-handed. The claw marks on her right side must have damaged the muscles more than he thought. They ate in silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the wind beginning to rise outside. When she finished, Thora set the bowl down carefully. "The bed, it is yours. You need it more than I do. Where will you sleep?" "I have a bedroll. I will sleep outside." Willem stood and gathered his blanket from where he had stashed it that morning. There is a place near the woodshed, sheltered from the wind. The stars are bright this time of year. That is foolish. The cold will make you sick. I have slept in worse conditions. He had, during the war, in mud and snow, and once in a ditch filled with rainwater while enemy patrols passed overhead. Rest. Your body needs it to heal. He left before she could protest further, taking his bedroll and a spare blanket to the sheltered spot behind the woodshed where the cabin wall blocked the north wind. The ground was hard and cold, but he had meant what he said about the stars. They were magnificent, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet, and he lay there watching them wheel slowly overhead until sleep claimed him. The next days fell into a rhythm. Willem would wake before dawn, stiff and cold but alive, and go inside to build up the fire and prepare a simple breakfast. Thora would be awake already, sitting up in bed with that watchful expression that never quite left her face. They would eat together, speaking little, and then he would go out to work on the tasks that filled his days. Wood needed cutting and splitting for winter. The small garden plot required harvesting. Fences needed mending. The work was endless on a frontier homestead, and Willem attacked it with the grim determination of a man trying to outrun his thoughts. Each evening he would return to find Thora a little stronger, a little more mobile. By the third day she could stand on her own, though it clearly caused her pain. By the fifth, she was moving around the cabin in careful increments, testing her limits. "You should not push yourself," Willem said that evening, watching her hobble from the bed to the fire and back. "I will not heal by lying still." She lowered herself to sit on the edge of the bed, breathing hard. "My people say that movement keeps the blood flowing and the wounds from growing stiff. Your people are right to a point, but you also need rest. I have rested enough." There was frustration in her voice. "I need to regain my strength. I need to leave before I bring trouble to your door." "What kind of trouble?" Thora was quiet for a long moment. "My clan exiled me. If they learn where I am, they may come to ensure I have left their territory entirely." "I would not want you caught in the middle of that." "Why were you exiled?" "Because I refused to kill a human child." She said it flatly, without emotion, but Willem saw the tension in her shoulders. "During the war, near the end, my raiding party came upon a farmstead. Everyone was dead or fled except for a girl, perhaps 7 years old, hiding in the root cellar. My commander ordered me to finish the job. I refused. He brought me before the clan elders and they gave me a choice, exile or execution. I chose exile." Willem felt something cold settle in his chest. "That took courage, or foolishness. I have been wandering for nearly a year now, keeping to the mountains, avoiding both human and orc settlements. The hunting is poor and winter is coming. I do not know if I will survive it. You could stay here." The words were out before Willem fully thought them through. "Help me through the winter. I could use another pair of hands and you would have shelter and food." Thora stared at him. "You cannot be serious." "Why not?" "Because I am an orc." "Because if your neighbors discover me, they will drive me out or worse. Because staying here puts you at risk." "That is my choice to make." Willem met her gaze steadily. "I spent 3 years fighting your kind. I killed more orcs than I can remember, and every single one of those deaths sits like a stone in my gut. Maybe I cannot change what I did, but I can choose differently now. I am choosing to offer you a place to stay if you want it." She looked away toward the fire. "You are a strange man, Willem Harrow." "So I have been told." Thora did not give him an answer that night, but when morning came and he prepared to go work on repairing the barn roof, she followed him outside. She still moved carefully, favoring her right side, but there was determination in every step. "What are you doing?" Willem asked. "I am going to help." She surveyed the barn, the missing shingles and sagging beam. "I am good with my hands, I can learn. Your ribs are not healed close enough. Show me what needs doing." And so they worked together, Willem on the roof and Thora on the ground, handing up tools and materials, learning the rhythm of the repair work. She did not complain about the pain he knew she must be feeling, and when he called for breaks, she would sit in the autumn sun with her face turned upward, breathing deep. Over the following weeks, Thora grew stronger. The wounds on her abdomen healed to angry red lines that would scar but no longer troubled her. The ribs knit themselves back together with the resilience of youth and a naturally robust constitution. She worked alongside Willem from dawn until dusk, learning the 100 small tasks that kept a homestead running. She learned to split wood with an axe, though her technique was rougher than his. She learned to repair harnesses and tend the small flock of chickens he kept. She learned to bake bread in the stone oven he had built into the side of the fireplace. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other. Willem discovered that Thora had a dry sense of humor that emerged when she felt comfortable, usually in the form of sardonic observations about his organizational methods, or lack thereof. She discovered that Willem sang while he worked, old songs from his childhood, and that his voice was surprisingly pleasant, though he seemed embarrassed when she mentioned it. They talked in the evenings after the work was done, sitting by the fire while the temperature dropped outside. Thora told him about growing up in the mountain clans, about the harsh winters and harsher discipline that shaped young orcs into warriors. About her mother, who had died in a raid when Thora was 12, and her father, who had disowned her when the elders pronounced exile. About the loneliness of the past year, always moving, always hiding, never belonging anywhere. Willem told her about his own childhood in the Southern Territories, about joining the army at 16 because it seemed like an adventure, about learning very quickly that war was not glorious but brutal and exhausting and soul-crushing, about the friends he had lost and the nightmares that still woke him sometimes, about coming to this remote valley specifically because he wanted to be far from people and their expectations and judgments. "We are both running from something," Thora observed one night as October slid into November and the first snow began to fall. "Maybe," Willem poked at the fire, "or running toward something new. Is there a difference?" "I think there might be." She considered that in silence, and he found himself watching the firelight play across her features, the strong line of her jaw, the way her small tusks caught the glow. She was handsome rather than beautiful by human standards, but there was something compelling about her face, an honesty and openness that he rarely saw in people of any species. The first real snowstorm came in mid-November, dumping 2 feet of heavy white across the valley overnight. Willem woke in his spot behind the woodshed to find himself nearly buried, the cold so intense it hurt to breathe. He struggled free of the drift that had formed around him and stumbled to the cabin door, his hands so numb he could barely work the latch. Thora took one look at him and pulled him inside, scolding. "You are freezing. Get by the fire before you lose your fingers." He collapsed in front of the hearth while she built up the flames and brought him hot tea, her movements efficient and sure. When feeling returned to his extremities in waves of painful tingling, Willem looked up to find her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "You cannot keep sleeping outside," Thora said. "Not in winter. It will kill you. I will not put you out of the bed. Then we will share it." She said it matter-of-factly, as if proposing they share a meal rather than sleeping space. "The bed is large enough for 2 if we do not mind closeness, and body heat will keep us both warmer." Willem felt his face heat despite the lingering chill. "That would not be proper. Thora made a dismissive gesture. Proper is a luxury for people who have choices. We are trying to survive winter. Nothing about survival is proper. She had a point, much as Willem wanted to protest. The truth was that sleeping outside in winter was dangerous, potentially fatal, and he had been taking that risk every night for weeks now, rather than displace an injured woman from his only bed. But Thora was healed now, or nearly so, and the practical reality of their situation outweighed concerns about propriety. "If you are certain," he said finally, "I am certain you are an idiot for sleeping outside this long." But there was warmth in her voice, almost fondness. "Tonight you sleep inside. That is final." That night, after they had eaten and banked the fire for sleep, Willem approached the bed with a mixture of awkwardness and relief. Thora was already there, lying on the far side with her back to the wall, leaving room for him on the outer edge. He lay down carefully, maintaining as much distance as the narrow bed allowed, and pulled the blankets over them both. "Good night, Thora." "Good night, Willem." The warmth was immediate and wonderful. The combined heat of their bodies trapped beneath the blankets, creating a small pocket of comfort against the cold that pressed at the walls. Willem could hear the wind howling outside, driving snow against the shutters, and felt profound gratitude for solid walls and a roof overhead. Gradually, his muscles relaxed from their constant tension against the cold, and he drifted toward sleep. Sometime in the deep hours of night, he half woke to find that they had shifted together unconsciously, seeking warmth. Thora's back was pressed against his chest, his arm draped over her waist. He should have moved, should have restored the careful distance, but she was warm and solid and sleeping peacefully, and after a moment's hesitation, he let himself settle back into sleep. Morning brought embarrassment and hasty separation, both of them pretending nothing had happened as they went about preparing breakfast. But the pattern was set. Each night they shared the bed, and each morning they woke tangled together, and each day they grew a little more comfortable with the arrangement. Winter deepened. Snow piled high around the cabin, and the work shifted from outdoor tasks to indoor maintenance and survival. Willem taught Thora to card wool and spin thread on his mother's old spinning wheel. Thora taught Willem tricks for stretching food supplies and making tough meat tender through long, slow cooking. They played cards in the evening with a battered deck Willem had brought from his army days, and discovered that Thora was a ruthless competitor who had no qualms about gloating when she won. December arrived with a cold so intense that water froze in the bucket overnight even inside the cabin. They burned through firewood at an alarming rate, and Willem spent his days cutting more from the deadfall in the forest nearby, hauling it back on a sledge while Thora split what he brought. The work was exhausting but necessary. To run out of wood was to die. It was on one of these wood-gathering expeditions that Willem ran into Garrett Morrison, also hauling deadfall on a sledge pulled by his aging mule. The old man stopped when he saw Willem, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Harrow, you have been scarce lately. Busy keeping ahead of winter." Willem tried to keep his voice casual. "How are things down valley? Cold. Johnson's youngest took sick with the lung fever, died 3 days past." Garrett's weathered face was grim. Winter does not forgive mistakes. No, it does not. Willem felt the weight of that truth. "I am sorry about the boy." Garrett studied him a moment longer. "You have smoke from your chimney day and night. That is a lot of wood for one man living alone." Willem's heart kicked against his ribs. "I like to stay warm. MMM." The old man did not sound convinced, but he did not press. "You let me know if you need anything. Help, supplies, whatever. These hills are hard enough without trying to go it alone." "I will. Thank you, Garrett." They parted ways, and Willem hurried back to the cabin with a tight feeling in his chest. He had been careful, so careful, but the truth was that secrets were hard to keep in small communities, and eventually someone would notice something amiss. When he told Thora about the encounter that evening, she nodded slowly. We knew this could not last forever. It can last as long as we make it last. Willem heard the fierceness in his own voice. I am not turning you out into winter. I am not asking you to, but we should be prepared for the possibility that people will find out, have a plan. They discussed it late into the night, weighing options, all of them bad. If the neighbors discovered Thora, there would be consequences. Best case, they would demand she leave. Worst case, they would form a mob and drive her out by force, possibly burning Willem's cabin in the process. The middle ground was a tense standoff that could turn violent at any moment. We could go somewhere else, Thora said finally, further into the mountains, build a shelter and wait out the winter together. That is a death sentence. We would never make it. Willem shook his head. We stay here. We are careful, and if it comes to confrontation, we face it together. Thora looked at him across the firelight, her golden eyes reflecting the flames. Why are you doing this? Truly, you could avoid so much trouble by simply sending me away. Because it is the right thing to do. He paused, searching for words. And because I do not want you to go. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and honest. Thora's expression softened in a way he had not seen before. I do not want to go either. Something shifted in that moment, some invisible boundary crossed. When they went to bed that night, there was no awkwardness, no pretense of maintaining distance. Willem held her close from the start, and Thora turned in his arms so they lay face to face in the darkness, close enough that he could feel her breath on his skin. This is complicated, she whispered. Yes, your people will never accept it. Mine would kill me if they knew, I know. We cannot have a future, Willem, not really. Then we will have now. He reached up to brush a strand of dark hair from her face. Is that enough? Thora was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, a gesture of intimacy and trust. It has to be. They fell asleep like that, foreheads touching, breath mingling. And when Willem woke in the gray pre-dawn light, his first thought was not of firewood or breakfast or the 100 tasks that filled his days, but of the woman sleeping peacefully in his arms. The days that followed were both easier and harder than before. Easier because they no longer pretended to be merely cohabitants sharing space out of necessity. Harder because every moment of closeness was shadowed by the knowledge that their situation was temporary, impossible, doomed from the start. But they took what they could, stealing moments of tenderness between the grinding work of survival. A hand squeeze while passing in the cabin. A kiss on the forehead before sleep. Small intimacies that meant everything. Christmas came and went unmarked except for a slightly larger dinner and Thora's surprise when Willem produced a small gift he had been working on in secret. A carving of a mountain cat, fierce and beautiful, rendered in smooth pine. I thought you would like something to remember your victory by, he said, suddenly uncertain. Thora turned the carving over in her hands, studying it from every angle. Her eyes were suspiciously bright when she looked up. It is beautiful, thank you, she paused. I have nothing to give you. You have given me company through the winter. That is gift enough. She set the carving carefully on the table beside the bed and pulled him close, kissing him properly for the first time. And Willem thought that this was what he had been missing during all his years of fighting and running and trying to forget. Not passion, though there was that, but connection. The simple human need to be known and valued by another person, regardless of the shape that person took. January brought a brief thaw followed by another storm, this one worse than any before it. For 3 days, the world outside the cabin was nothing but howling white wind and snow that fell so thick Willem could not see the barn from the door. They stayed inside, keeping the fire burning, rationing their food and trusting that the storm would break before their supplies ran out. On the second night, huddled together for warmth with the temperature dropping so low that frost formed on the inside of the walls, Thora said, "Tell me about your dreams, not the nightmares from the war, your real dreams. What did you want before all of this?" Willem thought about it, sorting through memories that felt like they belonged to a different person. "I wanted to be a carpenter. My father was one, very skilled. He could make furniture so fine that nobles would commission it. I wanted to learn that craft to make beautiful things. But then the war came and everything changed. Would you still want that? If you could, maybe. Though I think what I really wanted was not carpentry itself, but the idea of creating something lasting, something that would outlive me." He tightened his arms around her. "What about you?" "I wanted to be a healer." Thora laughed softly at his surprised sound. "Does that shock you, that an orc would want to save lives rather than take them?" "No, it fits you. You have gentle hands despite your strength." "My mother was a healer, one of the best in our clan. She taught me herbs and stitching and how to set bones. I was supposed to follow her path. But then she was killed, and my father insisted I train as a warrior instead. He said the clan needed fighters more than healers, that we all had to do our part for the war effort." Her voice grew distant. "I never got to choose. You could still learn. When spring comes, I could take you to the settlements. There are healers there who might teach you. You know that is impossible, maybe, or maybe we make it possible." The storm broke on the third day, and they dug themselves out into a world transformed by snow. The drifts came up to Willem's chest in places, and it took them most of a week to clear paths between the cabin, barn, and woodshed. The chickens had survived by huddling together in the coop, though they were ruffled and indignant about the whole experience. The stored food was holding, barely, but they would need to be even more careful with portions going forward. February arrived with the slow, grudging promise of longer days, though winter showed no signs of loosening its grip. Willem and Thora fell into a comfortable domestic rhythm that felt almost like a real life, almost like they were a normal couple facing normal challenges. It was a pleasant illusion that lasted until the day Garrett Morrison showed up at the cabin door unannounced. Willem answered the knock to find the old man standing there with a grim expression, a shotgun cradled in the crook of his arm. Behind him, barely visible through the trees, Willem could make out two more figures. His blood went cold. "Garrett, this is a surprise." "I expect it is." The old man's eyes moved past Willem to where Thora stood frozen near the fire. "Word came up valley from the Morrison place. My nephew was hunting in the high woods, saw smoke from your chimney, watched for a while, saw her." He jerked his chin toward Thora. "An orc, Willem, in your home, during wartime. The war is over." "Not for most folks it is not. You know that." Garrett's voice was not angry, but it was inflexible. "I came up here myself to see if it was true, hoped my nephew was mistaken, but there she stands. Her name is Thora. She was injured. I helped her heal. She has done nothing wrong. She exists, son. That is enough." Garrett shifted his weight, the shotgun moving slightly. "I am giving you a courtesy because you are a good man and you helped me with the harvest, but she needs to leave. Now, today. It is the middle of winter. She will die out there. That is her problem, not yours." The old man's expression softened slightly. "I am trying to help you here. If the others come up, they would not be so patient. There is talk of burning you out, of making an example. You do not want that." Willem felt Thora move up beside him, standing straight despite the fear he could sense radiating from her. She addressed Garrett directly, her voice steady. He is right. I will go. I do not want Willem punished for showing mercy. No. Willem reached out and took her hand, holding tight. This is my land, my home. I choose who stays and who goes, and I choose her. Then you choose exile alongside her. Garrett sighed. I am sorry, Willem, I truly am, but the valley will not tolerate this. You have until morning to gather what you can carry and go. After that, I cannot guarantee your safety. The old man turned and walked back into the trees, the other figures following. Willem stood in the doorway until they disappeared from view, then closed the door and leaned against it, his mind racing. I am sorry. Thora's voice was small. I brought this on you. No. I made my choices knowing the risks. He turned to face her, taking both her hands. We leave tonight. We take what we can and head into the high country. There are old caves up there, places I scouted during the war. We can shelter until spring, and then we figure out what comes next. Willem, we cannot survive the winter in the mountains. You said so yourself. Then we find another way, but I am not losing you to make some small-minded people feel safe. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. We are in this together now, all the way. They spent the afternoon packing with grim efficiency. Food, blankets, tools, fire-starting supplies, everything they could carry on their backs. Willem fashioned a travois from broken skis and rope to haul additional gear. As the sun set, they took one last look around the small cabin that had been home for the past months. I built this place myself, Willem said quietly. Every log, every shingle, took me 6 months of hard work. And now I am walking away from it. We could stay, fight them if they come. And what would we win? A burned cabin and blood on our hands. He shook his head. No, there has been enough killing. We leave, we survive, we build something new somewhere else. They set out into the winter night, following the mountain trails by the light of a half-moon. The cold was brutal, sapping strength with every step, but they pushed forward, Willem pulling the travois and Thora scouting ahead to find the safest path. Hours passed in a blur of exertion and freezing air, until finally, as false dawn began to gray the eastern sky, they reached the first of the cave systems Willem remembered. It was not much, a shallow depression in the mountainside that went back perhaps 20 feet, but it was out of the wind and dry. They collapsed inside, too exhausted to do more than spread blankets and huddle together for warmth. We made it, Thora murmured against his chest. This is just the beginning. We have to survive until spring now. We will. Her arms tightened around him. We have made it this far. We will make it the rest of the way. Over the following weeks, they learned to survive in conditions that would have broken weaker people. Willem hunted small game with snares and his hunting knife, while Thora foraged for edible roots and bark beneath the snow. They rationed their supplies carefully, making everything last as long as possible. The cave was cold, far colder than the cabin had ever been, and they burned through their firewood, quickly trying to maintain enough heat to survive the nights. By mid-March, they were both gaunt, their bodies having consumed every spare bit of fat and muscle not absolutely essential. But the snow was beginning to melt in earnest now, water trickling down the mountainside in tiny streams. The days grew longer and marginally warmer. Spring was coming, bringing with it the possibility of survival. It was on one of these early spring days that they had visitors. Willem was checking his snares when he heard voices echoing through the rocks, speaking in the guttural language of orcs. He crept back to the cave to find Thora standing at the entrance, staring at a group of 5 orc warriors who had emerged from the trees below. Thora Brennick. The leader, a huge male with scars covering half his face, spoke in accented human common. The clan did not expect to find you still alive. Yet here I stand, Crawl. Thora's voice was cool. What do you want to bring news? Your father is dead, killed in a skirmish with human raiders 2 months past. Before he died, he recanted his disowning of you. The elders have lifted your exile. You may return to the clan. Willem saw Thora stiffen in shock. After all this time, now they forgive me. Your father's dying wish carried weight. Kral's eyes moved to Willem, standing behind Thora. Though I see you have been keeping company with humans, that will be harder to forgive. I am not asking for forgiveness. Thora stepped forward, positioning herself between Willem and the warriors. I am not coming back. I have a life here now. Here, Kral gestured at the crude cave, the meager supplies. You live like an animal in the wilderness. The clan offers you warmth, food, community, your place among your people. My place was taken from me when I chose mercy over murder. I will not go back to a people who would punish that choice, dying wish or not. Thora's voice rang with certainty. Tell the elders I am grateful for my father's change of heart, but my answer is no. The warriors exchanged glances. Kral studied Thora for a long moment, then nodded slowly. So be it. But know this, if you refuse the clan, you can never return. This offer comes once only. I understand. Then may your path be clear, Thora Brennick. You were always too soft for our ways, but you had honor. I hope you find peace in whatever life you choose. The warriors withdrew, melting back into the forest as silently as they had come. When they were gone, Thora sagged against the cave wall and Willem hurried to support her. Are you all right? I just gave up everything I have ever known. She laughed shakily. Everything I was raised to believe in. For what? A life of hiding in caves. For the chance to choose your own path. Willem cupped her face in his hands. For the chance to be who you truly are rather than who others demand you be, that is worth everything. Is it? Her eyes searched his. What kind of life can we have, Willem? We cannot go back to your valley. I cannot return to my clan. Where do we belong? With each other. Everything else we can figure out. But Thora's question haunted him over the following days as the snow continued its slow retreat and the mountains began to green with new growth. She was right that they had no clear path forward. They could not return to his homestead, and living in the mountains permanently was not sustainable. They needed a real solution, a place where they could build a life without fear of persecution from either side. The answer came from an unexpected source. In early April, as they were preparing to move to a lower elevation and better shelter, a lone traveler appeared on the mountain trail. He was human, middle-aged, with the look of a merchant or trader. He stopped when he saw them, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. Easy, friends, I am just passing through. His eyes took in their ragged appearance and makeshift camp. You look like you could use help. Are you refugees? Something like that. Willem kept himself between the man and Thora. We are managing. I am sure you are, but in case you are interested, there is a settlement forming about 3 days west of here over the high pass, a place called Crossroads. It is being built specifically as a neutral ground where humans, orcs, and other species can live and trade in peace. The man smiled. The founders are looking for settlers, people willing to take a chance on a new way of doing things. They are offering land grants and supplies to anyone willing to work hard and live in harmony with their neighbors. Willem and Thora exchanged glances. A neutral settlement. Is that even possible? The founders think so. They are veterans from both sides of the war, people who are tired of fighting and want to build something better. No guarantees it will work, but it is a chance. The traveler tipped his hat. Food for thought anyway, safe travels. He continued on his way, leaving them staring at each other with dawning hope. It could be a trap, Thora said, or a disaster waiting to happen, or it could be exactly what we need. Willem felt excitement building in his chest. A place where we do not have to hide. Where we could build a real life together. You would really do that. Leave everything behind to try some experiment that might fail. I already left everything behind when I left the valley with you. He took her hands, his grip firm and sure. I meant what I said. We are in this together, all the way. If this crossroads place is real, if it is even half of what that man described, it is worth the risk. They discussed it through the rest of the day and into the night, weighing every angle. In the end, the decision was simple. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. As soon as they were strong enough to travel, they would head west over the high pass and see if this crossroads settlement was real or just a beautiful dream. It took them a week to prepare, building up their strength on spring plants and the improving hunting. When they finally set out, their packs were better stocked than they had been in months, and hope rode light in their chests. The journey over the pass was brutal. 3 days of hard climbing followed by a terrifying descent on the far side, but they pushed through, driving each other forward when exhaustion threatened to stop them. And then, on the afternoon of the 4th day, they came around a bend in the trail and saw it. A cluster of buildings in a mountain valley, smoke rising from multiple chimneys, the sound of hammers and saws drifting on the spring breeze. As they approached, they could see that the town was indeed mixed, humans and orcs working side by side on construction projects, children of both species playing in the muddy street. A woman approached as they entered the settlement, her smile warm and welcoming. She was human with gray-streaked hair and a practical manner. "Welcome to Crossroads. I am Sarah Chen, one of the settlement founders. You look like you have had a hard journey." "We have." Willem felt his throat tighten with emotion. "We heard you might have a place for people like us." Sarah's gaze moved between them, taking in their clasped hands, their obvious closeness. "People like you are exactly why we built this town. Come on. Let us get you fed and housed, and then we can talk about where you might fit in here." The next hours passed in a blur of food, warmth, and conversation. Sarah and the other founders explained their vision, a place where the old prejudices could be set aside, where people were judged by their actions rather than their species. It was still early days, they admitted, and there were challenges, misunderstandings, conflicts that had to be worked through. But the core principle held. Everyone who came to Crossroads agreed to live in peace and contribute to the common good. "We have land available for homesteading," Sarah said, showing them a rough map of the surrounding area. "If you are willing to clear it and build on it, it is yours. We also need craftspeople, builders, hunters, healers. What skills do you bring?" "I am a decent carpenter and hunter," Willem said. "And I have experience with construction and farming. I was trained as a warrior, but I want to learn healing." Thora's voice was tentative. "I have some basic knowledge and I would like to expand it. We have 2 healers in town already, 1 human and 1 orc. I am certain they would be happy to have an apprentice." Sarah smiled at them. "It sounds like you would be valuable additions to Crossroads. What do you say? Are you willing to give it a try?" Willem looked at Thora, saw his own hope reflected in her golden eyes. Together they nodded. "We are willing." That night they slept in a real bed in a small cabin set aside for newcomers, and for the first time in months, Willem did not worry about freezing or starving or being driven away by hostile neighbors. They were safe. They were together. They had a chance at a real future. In the morning, they met with the town council to formalize their claim on a plot of land at the edge of the settlement, near the river. It was good land, Sarah assured them, fertile and with access to water year-round. They could build there, farm there, make a life there. Over the following weeks, they threw themselves into the work with the desperate energy of people who had been given an unexpected gift. Willem felled trees and began construction on a new cabin, this one larger than his old homestead, with 2 rooms and a proper stone hearth. Thora apprenticed with the town healers, learning new techniques and refining the knowledge her mother had given her years ago. In the evenings, they would return to their temporary quarters exhausted but satisfied, falling into bed to sleep the dreamless sleep of the truly tired. The town accepted them with a matter-of-fact warmth that still sometimes surprised Willem. Their relationship drew no more comment than any other couple, and when they helped with community projects, they were judged by the quality of their work rather than their species. It was not perfect. There were still those who struggled with old prejudices, who kept their distance or made occasional comments. But the founders dealt with such issues firmly and fairly, making clear that intolerance had no place in Crossroads. By midsummer, the cabin was finished, a sturdy structure that would see them through many winters. They moved in on a warm July evening, carrying their few possessions across the threshold together. That night, they christened their new home properly, and as Willem held Thora close afterward, he marveled at the journey that had brought them here. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up your clan, your people, every day?" Thora traced patterns on his chest with one finger. "But I do not regret choosing you, choosing this. My clan never felt like home the way this does. I gave up much less, and I still feel the loss sometimes. My land, my solitude. Do you regret that?" "Not for a moment." He kissed her forehead. "Though I do miss sleeping under the stars on warm nights." "Then let us do that." Thora sat up suddenly. "Why not? The night is clear and we have blankets. Let us sleep outside like we did that first night." They gathered what they needed and made a nest in the soft grass beside their cabin, lying side by side with the summer stars wheeling overhead. The air was warm and gentle, nothing like the brutal cold of that first winter night, but the feeling was the same. Peace, possibility, the simple joy of being alive and together. "Thank you," Thora said softly. "For what?" "For giving me your bed that first night. For sleeping outside in the cold rather than turning me away. For choosing me over everything else." She rolled onto her side to face him. "You saved my life in more ways than one. You gave me a reason to keep living. All those years after the war, I was just going through the motions, surviving but not really alive. You changed that." Willem touched her face gently. "We saved each other." They lay there until sleep claimed them, wrapped in blankets and each other, beneath the cold, bright stars that had witnessed their beginning and now watched over their future. And in the morning, they would wake to continue building the life they had chosen, the impossible life that had somehow become real. Autumn came again, and with it the anniversary of that night when Thora had collapsed at Willem's fence, wounded and desperate. They marked it quietly, just the two of them, with a special meal and remembrances of how far they had come. The cabin was warm and well stocked. The root cellar was full of preserved food. The healing practice Thora had established was thriving, serving both human and orc residents of Crossroads. Willem had found work as the town's primary carpenter, crafting furniture and fittings for the growing number of buildings. He was not making the fine pieces his father had created, not yet, but his work was solid and respected, and he was learning every day. More importantly, he was creating things that would last, things that would outlive him, just as he had once dreamed. In October, on a crisp morning with the aspen leaves turned to gold, Willem took Thora to the hillside above their cabin and asked her to marry him. He had carved a ring from mountain ash wood, simple but beautiful, and he held it out with hands that trembled slightly. "I know this is not traditional for your people or mine. I know we have faced enough prejudice that adding a formal bond might seem unnecessary. but I want the world to know that I choose you today and every day for as long as we live. Will you marry me, Thora?" She took the ring with shining eyes, sliding it onto her finger. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married the following month in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions, officiated by Sarah Chen and witnessed by the entire town. Thora wore a dress of soft green that brought out the emerald tones in her skin, while Willem wore his best shirt and a nervous smile. When they exchanged vows, promising to support and cherish each other through all the challenges ahead, there was not a dry eye among the witnesses. The celebration that followed was joyous and raucous, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Old enemies toasted together. Children played without regard for species. And at the center of it all, Willem and Thora held each other close, grateful beyond words for the community that had embraced them and the love that had transformed both their lives. That night, they returned to their cabin and stood together in the doorway, looking out at the settlement spread below them, the warm lights of homes where people of all kinds lived in tentative but growing harmony. "We helped build this," Thora said wonderingly. "Just by being ourselves, by refusing to let old hatreds define us, we helped prove it was possible. You did the hardest part. I just gave you a bed to sleep in. You gave me much more than that." She turned in his arms, her expression serious. "You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a reason to believe that different people could find common ground. You gave me a home. We gave each other a home." Willem kissed her gently. "And we will protect it together for as long as we live." They went inside, closing the door on the cold night air, and banked the fire for sleep. In the bed they now shared without question or awkwardness. They held each other close and drifted off to dreams of the future they would build together. Spring came again, bringing with it new challenges and opportunities. The settlement continued to grow, drawing refugees and idealists from both human and orc territories. There were conflicts, inevitable growing pains as old prejudices clashed with new ideals, but the community worked through them with patience and determination. Thora took on 2 apprentices, one human and one orc, teaching them the healing arts with the same gentle firmness her mother had shown her years ago. Willem's carpentry business expanded, and he hired help, taking on larger projects including a community meeting hall that would serve as the heart of Crossroads for generations to come. They built a life that was full and rich and sometimes difficult, but always worth the effort. On warm nights, they would still sometimes sleep outside beneath the stars, remembering that cold autumn evening when a wounded orc woman had collapsed at a lonely homestead's fence, and a weary ex-soldier had made the simple choice to offer kindness instead of fear. It was on one such night, 5 years after their wedding, that Thora turned to Willem with a particular expression he had learned to recognize. "I am pregnant." The words hung in the warm air between them, enormous with implication. Willem felt his breath catch, joy and terror warring in his chest. "Are you certain? As certain as a healer can be." Thora laughed, a sound edged with nervousness. "We are going to have a child, Willem. A human orc child in a world that still is not sure how to feel about that. Then we will teach the world." He pulled her close, resting a hand on her still flat belly. "Just like we taught Crossroads, one person at a time, one choice at a time, one act of kindness at a time." Their daughter was born in midwinter, a healthy baby girl with her mother's green skin and golden eyes, her father's nose and dark hair. They named her Mira, meaning peace, and she became the first child born to a mixed union in Crossroads. The town welcomed her with gifts and celebrations, and if there were those who viewed her birth with suspicion or concern, they kept their doubts to themselves in the face of the community's overwhelming joy. As Mira grew, she became a symbol of what crossroads represented. The possibility of a future where old divisions no longer mattered, where people were judged by their character rather than their blood. Other mixed couples followed Willem and Thora's example, and within a generation, Crossroads had become a place where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. But that was all in the future. For now, on a warm autumn night 15 years after that first meeting, Willem and Thora sat on the porch of their cabin, watching their daughter play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. They had built something lasting after all, Willem thought. Not furniture or buildings, though those were important, but a family, a community, a new way of living that proved old enemies could become partners, lovers, friends. "You ever think about that first night?" Thora asked, as if reading his thoughts. "When you carried me inside and gave me your only bed?" "Sometimes." Willem took her hand, running his thumb over the wooden ring she still wore. "Do you, all the time? I was so certain I was going to die that night. And then this strange human man appeared and saved my life for no reason, except that it was the right thing to do." She leaned against his shoulder. "You changed everything with that one choice. We changed everything together." He watched Mira chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "And we will keep changing it one day at a time for as long as we have." "For as long as we have," Thora echoed. "I love you, Willem Harrow." "I love you too, Thora Harrow." They sat there as the stars began to emerge overhead, the same stars that had watched over Willem on those cold nights when he slept outside rather than displace an injured stranger. The same stars that had guided them over the mountain pass to this new life. The same stars that would shine on their daughter and her children and all the generations to come, born into a world that was slowly learning that kindness mattered more than fear, and that love could bridge any divide. The fire in the hearth burned warm behind them. The cabin they had built together stood solid and strong. And in the settlement spread across the valley below, lights were winking on as families gathered for the evening meal, human and orc and everything in between, learning to live together in harmony because two people had once chosen compassion over suspicion. It was not a perfect world. There were still challenges, still conflicts, still those who clung to old prejudices. But it was a better world than the one Willem and Thora had been born into, and they had helped make it so. That was enough. That was everything. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars shone bright and cold above, Willem pulled his wife close and thought about beginnings. How something as simple as giving a weary stranger a place to rest could change the course of two lives, a community, perhaps even a small corner of the world. He had given Thora his only bed that first night and slept outside beneath the cold, bright stars. And in return, she had given him a future worth living for, a love worth fighting for, a family worth protecting. They had both given each other everything that mattered. And they would continue to do so for all the days and years to come, beneath the eternal stars that witnessed every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of grace that slowly transformed the world into something better than it had been before. That was their story. That was their triumph. And as they sat together on the porch of their home, surrounded by the life they had built and the love they had chosen, they knew with absolute certainty that every hardship, every moment of fear, every sacrifice along the way had been worth it. The stars shone on. The night deepened. And inside the cabin, the fire burned warm and bright, a beacon of hope in a world that was learning, slowly but surely, to embrace light over darkness, love over fear, and kindness over cruelty. It was everything they had fought for, everything they had dreamed of, everything they had built together from that first cold night when compassion had triumphed over fear. and a single choice had changed 2 lives forever.